oaspeți, stimați colegi, ne bucurăm să vă găzduim în universitatea noastră pentru prima sesiune a programului vostru îmbunătățirea managementului universitar. Programul acesta de îmbunătățire a managementului universitar își propune un lucru foarte ambițios: să pregătească aproximativ 900 de manageri universitari în țară și să cultive deprinderile manageriale bazate pe știința managementului. În zona noastră est-europeană este foarte explicabil că managementul și leadership-ul nu au fost și nu sunt încă înțelese. Datorită faptului că a existat un regim centralizat cu delegarea tuturor atribuțiilor de sus în jos, acest lucru nu a permis formarea unor adevărați manageri, în adevăratul sens al cuvântului. Cel mult, rectorii universităților erau un gospodar, cel mai mult. Cred că această deprindere s-a prelungit în foarte mare măsură și până acum. Pentru că e greu de înțeles pentru conducerea universității că a fi lider de universitate nu înseamnă să fii, nu este echivalent cu a fi un profesor bun. Noțiunile de governance, de management și de leadership nu sunt înțelese în sensul antreprenorial. Suntem militari, suntem dependenți foarte mult de minister, de fondurile ministerului. Și fără niciun fel de discuție, Ministerul Educației nu se poate deroga de responsabilitatea finanțării universităților în mare măsură. De altă parte, credem că dezvoltarea unor atitudini antreprenoriale în universitate este o necesitate absolută. Și sper că acest program va avea succes în sensul respectiv. Fiind președintele Consiliului Academic al Universității, am datoria să vă spun câteva cuvinte și despre universitate. Universitatea Babeș-Bolyai are numele de la doi patroni. Victor Babeș, care a fost microbiolog și a lucrat în laboratoarele lui Pasteur și este inventatorul vaccinului antivirabil, și Ian Boie, matematician, și este de asemenea inventatorul geometriei euclidiene în Cluj-Napoca. Este geometria spațiilor cosmice care se folosește acum. Este o universitate cu 50.000 de studenți aproximativ, 1.600 de cadre didactice și 1.200 persoane angajate în personalul academic, tehnic și administrativ. Deci este o întreprindere importantă, în special în Transilvania. Câteva lucruri despre istoria universității. În acest loc a fost înființat în 1581 primul colegiu iezuit, dintr-o misiune a papei de către călugărul italian Antonio Posedino, care cu 2 ani înainte înființase un asemenea colegiu în 1579, înființase actuala Universitate de la Vilnius. Deci Universitatea Vilnius și Universitatea de Cluj sunt universități surori, practic înființate în același timp. Istoria universității este complicată. La începutul secolului 17, ea este desființată de către protestanți. A fost înființată o universitate echivalentă și este cel a cărui proiect de diplomă a fost primul proiect de rachetă cosmică și este cunoscut ca fiind deventorul zborului cosmic împreună alături de Tsiolkovski și Goddard. Augustin Major, tot decan al Facultății de Fizică, tot legat de Facultatea de Fizică, care este inventatorul telefoniei multiple, principiul care s-a aplicat la prima comunicare transatlantică prin cablu telefonic între America și Europa, Eugen Speranția, Lucian Blaga, despre care nu mai vorbesc. Cu aceste cuvinte, eu închei prelegerea, cele câteva cuvinte de bun venit, urându-vă o ședere plăcută în Cluj și fructuoasă. Și aș da cuvântul domnului profesor Sorin Popescu pentru un salut din partea Ministerului Educației.
Vă mulțumesc, domnul președinte, mulțumesc și doamnă. Trebuie să vă spun că atunci când au plecat cele 10 proiecte strategice, pentru că asta este unul din cele 10, am fost în spate cei care am stimulat în promovarea lor și o parte dintre noi am participat chiar la întocmirea lor și la pornirea lor. Am fost un grup de oameni care lucrează împreună în diverse moduri deja de mai bine de 10 ani. Noi am simțit nevoia unei schimbări, dar știți că o schimbare trebuie să o începe atunci când a venit vremea ei, când lumea e pregătită să o primească și când există resurse. Mi s-a părut că acum este momentul în care condițiile pomenite sunt îndeplinite. Ministerul Educației, pe Direcția Generală Superioară, nu a preluat niciun proiect strategic direct, ci a rugat UEFISC-ul să preia aceste proiecte. Am avut mare noroc, mare șansă ca la UEFISC să fie oameni cu deschidere și cu viziune, condus de domnul Adrian Oraș, și și cu ajutorul lor am avut șansa să avem în acest moment 10 proiecte strategice care acționează conjugat. Sunt complementare. Sub o pălărie care se numește calitate și leadership și care deschide viziunea și strategia învățământului superior pe un orizont de timp 2025, un exercițiu de foresight. De desubt sunt 9 proiecte strategice care atacă principalele probleme pe care noi le-am considerat că trebuie să fie rezolvate sau la care trebuie să găsim soluții în următorii 5 ani. Pregătirea antreprenorială a managementului universitar este una din aceste probleme pe care o considerăm de maximă importanță pentru următoarea perioadă, nu numai în atragerea de resurse suplimentare din afara bugetului statului, ci însăși creșterea eficienței și eficacității utilizării banului public și creșterea eficienței investiției în educație. La acest proiect am avut șansa să lucrez direct și nemijlocit și eu la acest proiect. Mai mult, am mers în Anglia împreună cu inițiatorii lui ca să luăm legătura cu Institute of Education, să-i rugăm să ne asiste în acest demers. E un proiect în care credem și în care investim în continuare, investim atenție și prezența mea aici spune că investim energie și resurse și așteptăm și așteptările pe care le avem la acest proiect sunt sigur pe măsură. Eu vreau să urez
necesar că a fi manager nu înseamnă a fi ceea ce spuneam la început, bun gospodar. Să faci ceva înseamnă să deschizi noi drumuri, să devii antreprenor. Deci foarte mult. Dau cuvântul din partea conducerii proiectului domnului profesor Partea.
Good morning. I would prefer to speak in English because it was special yesterday coming from UK in our project. And I'm sure that most of you, of course, know it and would be easy to be understood. I am going to say two words about this event and about a very short presentation about the project. About this event, in my view, it is really a great event. It is a great event because it is hosted by one of our best universities. It is hosted by a university where the rector, Andrei Marga, when he was Minister of Education, was the only person coming to the office with a very clear vision and willingness to perform a real reform in higher education. And also, Șerban Agadi, one of the first members of the team to implement strategic management in our higher education system. It is a great event because the topic we choose for this event is something new for us. It is new even for Europe, for European universities. And we try to understand the meanings of this kind of powerful concepts like governance, like management in universities, leadership and entrepreneurship. We need them. Professor Sorin Popescu said that such kind of events and such kind of projects are starting when the time is right there. I'd like to tell you that the most important thing in performing the change, timing, depends also on our way of thinking, of mentalities. If 12 years ago we started to implement in our higher education system ideas about strategic management, a new way to finance our universities, we had at the time a lot of resistances coming from rectors, vice-rectors, deans, and so on, saying that it is too much change for our system. At that time, I recall that we had the first conference with all the rectors in Sibiu, and we have someone from Sibiu to recall that, in which we started to promote the basic ideas about strategic management. And while I was talking about strategic management, a rector, somebody from the audience actually said, "Do you consider us directors of Coca-Cola? We are university professors." And at that time, it struck me actually, this mentality. That professor, in a way, considered that only to be a very good professor in his own field, it's enough. No, it is not enough. After 12 years, our mentalities change. start a new project now to create sustainable mechanisms through competence centers in our universities to create training programs in academic management, in university management, in governance leadership, because we need them. So from this point of view, we consider that actually time has come. And also it is a great event because in this project we have very good experts coming from the East of Education, from London, Paul Temple and John Farrar. And it is really special today to have the opportunity to have a guest speaker, Michael Shepherd, former register of one of the most dynamic and entrepreneurial universities in UK, Warwick University. And he is going to create a debate today about what means actually good, successful university management and governance. So today we are trying to put together their experience and our willingness to continue the change. And also in the program we have the opportunity to listen to the rector of this university, Professor Andrei Mark, about his view concerning university vision, mission, leadership and governance. So we try to create this kind of environment, especially in this special hour. Personally, I feel a lot of pressure, emotional pressure, just thinking how important personalities have been there in this audience and in these microphones. Okay. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the project. I'm sure that some of you already knew some basic ideas, but because most of you, maybe you are not aware the whole image of the project, I'm going to start presenting. So it is a project concerned with improving university management, and only to position this project in this system of reforming our higher education, I would like to say that if in the beginning we wanted only to create the basis for changing legislation for strategic management and financing through a new system, our university, now we like to create centers of competence in some of our best universities in order to have a sustainable system to improve our university management. So the goal of the project is to improve university management by establishing and implementing a viable, adequate and updated, updated training system for university representatives and decision makers at various levels in order to increase efficiency and leadership in higher education. We said at various levels because by tradition in our higher education system all the decisions have been taken at the ministry level. Now we want the most important decisions concerning university life to be made at the university level through management. Objectives: strengthening of intra and inter-university cooperation and with other interested actors in order to develop an efficient system for higher education management. We need such an efficient higher education management. Improvement of managerial decision-making capacity by training the personnel in management positions from higher education institutions. Don't be afraid of this word training. It is extremely important even for us as university professors to learn about university management, to learn about university leadership, to learn about the best ways of performing managerial decisions. And I like to say again that we have already two universities in Romania, Babeş-Bolyai University and ASEC Bucharest. Universities already starting from last year before I really consider to be a very important step forward. So training should not be a war, you know, to bring fear for us. And development of human capital in universities. I like to say that this new concept of intellectual capital is extremely important. Only to give you an idea, in Austria, there is a new legislation asking universities starting from 2006 to prepare each year an intellectual capital report of the university. So in our project, we'd like to strengthen the human component of the intellectual capital. Partners, University of London, Institute of Education, already I mentioned our experts, and I'd like to say that both Paul and John worked with us for the last 10 years in several important projects in higher education, and Association from Implementing Democracy in Romania. This is a general scheme for working packages in our program. On the lateral we have general packages concerning management and communication to the environment, and in the middle we have 5 working packages. The first one is about establishing the training framework. This already has been done because it was in the very beginning to create the conception of the whole framework for our training programs. Work package number 2, development of the curriculum. It is important to have in our centers an adequate curriculum for training our university managers. And from this point of view, we learn and we use experience coming from the Institute of Education. Work package number 3, setting up the web knowledge platform. In order to create a sustainable mechanism for training, we also would like to have a platform, a virtual environment for knowledge, to put there all the important materials, such that any time anybody from our universities to use efficiently these materials. Work package number 4, training in university management up to 800 decision makers from universities. Of course, this is just a target, but we can increase this number according to our capacity. And work package number 5, organization of study visits. During the projects and during the next months, we will organize in our project 3 main visits in UK according to the topics in our curriculum and according to the experience of the universities we are going to visit in UK. About work package number 1, establishing the training framework, establishing the selection criteria for the centers and future trainers, and it took us a couple of months to create this kind of criteria and then to choose. Sending of the participation invitations, to receiving the offers from universities, and a lot of discussions, a lot of debates concerning who to be in this network of centers. Selection of the centers of competence and consult with the representatives of these centers of competence. Among the most important criteria to select this kind of centers of competence were previous experience of the university, the management in that university, the willingness of the university to be a part of a network of other universities, and of course, institutional capacity to create a sustainable mechanism for training. This is an illustration of the final result. So we have Cluj, Sibiu, Timișoara. In Bucharest, we decided to have 2 centers of competence, one organized by ASET and another one by the University of Bucharest, and Constanța and Iași. And of course, for each, we have partners. Work package number 2, development of the curriculum, identification of the training needs. This is very important because we are going actually to create, to have materials answer inform you that we had a couple of sessions with a lot of debates concerning the decisions for this training needs to be satisfied by our modules. These are topics we decided to have in our training programs, mentioning that in a sustainable system, these topics always can be improved. Strategic management, financial management, teaching management or educational policies, research management, quality management, higher education, marketing. I would like to say that 10 years ago, just saying university marketing was something unacceptable for many of our universities. Now we talk about university marketing. Internationalization of higher education, management of third-stream activities. This is very important from the new vision and mission of our universities. Resource management and sustainability, human resources management for higher education, support and services for students, institutional governance. This is really a key issue of today and this week debates. Integrity standards, the role of civil society in higher education, the role as a stakeholder, and communication in higher education. Work package number 4 and number 5, training in university management and organization of study visits. Training of trainers, in the first round to be about 70 persons. Training of university top management, we approximate about 80 persons. First round of the training, about 400 persons. That means really a large scale of our enterprise of this project. Organization of study visits, case studies on universities, Romanian universities, UK universities, and second round of the training for the next 400 persons. So it is really a very ambitious program. And with your help, we hope finally this program to be successful. Then we have on the top all of the competence centers I showed you before. From there, through continuous activities and training programs, we'll have trainers group, and then on the bottom, training of persons from university management structure. So it is a kind of structure in cascade program of training. Well, this is just to remind you that Peter Drucker, I would like to pronounce, once called father of management, said that the efficiency is doing better what is already being done. So we know how to run a university, but we have to learn how to run better our universities. And this is actually the main purpose, the main goal of our project. So to be an active university in a dynamic environment, economic and social political environment, is much more than just to apply routines. We need to learn to be creative, and we need to learn to use our liberties given by the legislation, such that our universities can be run by efficient companies. Expected results from the total of 7-8 centers of competencies, we hope 2 or 3 of them to become reference centers. That means centers to create models to be taken by other universities. And also they can be the main engine of the sustainable development system we like to create. And also, it will be a very interesting result if in some of these universities we will be able to develop master programs concerning university management, which we tried several years ago, but we were not successful. We hoped this program to increase, how can I say that, attraction, and also to develop the institutional capacity for some universities to provide such master programs. In our discussions, because we are going to stimulate debates today and the next days, we would like to talk and to understand much better, using also experience of our guest experts and guest speakers, about academic governance, about leadership, about management in Romania and by comparison in other European countries, to learn from these countries. Relations between academic governance, academic leadership, and academic management and performance. I like to say that by tradition in our universities, we had mostly administration. So the big step forward is to jump actually from this mentality of administrating the university to managing and then to be a leader of a university. Also to talk about academic elections of deans, faculty, schools, if we have time, because from election point of view, our universities are closed systems. And any of you having a background in science or engineering, you know very well that closed systems die. We need to open our systems. We need to change the legislation such that our elections to provide much, much better results. Okay, so these are the main ideas I wanted to tell you about the project. Concerning the visits, only to say that we intend to have 3 visits. We call Part A, Party B, and Party C. And for each of these visits, we assign a group of topics, 5 topics for each group, and then going to London, we will be able there to learn from the experience of some of the UK universities, and at the same time, by comparison, to talk about our models of our universities, such that after this visit, to, how can I say, to learn more and to do our homework to promote the best ideas to our colleagues and to other people in our competence centers. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mulțumim, domnul profesor Parteanu. La aplaudăm pe domnul Aș vrea să salut pe doamna Cărgașu, directoarea de proiect care a venit tocmai acum la București. Aș fi vrut să mai spun 2 lucruri legate de ceea ce a spus domnul profesor Parteanu. Într-adevăr, mentalitatea este cea care se schimbă greu. Primul îndemn de schimbare a mentalității în mod serios a fost prin programul de reformă a învățământului universitar din România, care a durat între 1997 și 2000. Atunci s-au pus bazele reformelor învățământului românesc și trebuie să menționăm acest program ca un primul program important care a dus la revoluționarea învățământului, o schimbare esențială a învățământului superior. Dintre cele 7 centre de competență pe care le-a prezentat domnul Parteanu, unul este cel de la Cluj. El s-a dezvoltat în jurul Centrului de Dezvoltare Universitară, înființat în 1998, care are printre atribuții organizarea unor astfel de training-uri, organizarea unei biblioteci de management, care, din păcate, nu prea e foarte mult consultată de către manageri de universitate, universitatea noastră. Editarea unei reviste, este prima revistă de management de universitate din România și care este singura înregistrată în baza de date a Institutului de Învățământ Superior din Boston, Center for Higher Education din Boston. Întocmește planurile strategice și documentele importante ale învățământului. Deci, în jurul acestui centru de dezvoltare universitară s-a creat acest centru de competențe și sper că noi, datorită și tradiției, ne vom califica cele din urmă
Well, Rector, colleagues, it's a very, very pleasure and a privilege to come and speak here in this fantastic hall, but also do your amazing programme. If I may say so, the programme that you've created here is a model for other countries in Europe. Do not imagine that other countries in Europe are making the same progress as you are in the whole question of reform, not just of governments, but of higher education. So it really is very nice to come and speak in the programme, and thank you very much for inviting me. Let me start by saying, and you probably all know this, but let me just emphasise it, that the European Union is extremely concerned to modernise European higher education because it feels that higher education in Europe has fallen behind, certainly the United States, and is probably falling behind various Asian countries, particularly China and India. Back in 2003, the European Union, the Council of Ministers, issued the Lisbon Declaration. The Lisbon Declaration both started the reform movement in Europe, but also established certain targets. One of the targets was that research and development should comprise 3% of European GDP. If you look at how well we've done in that, at the moment, European GDP is only 1.9% R&D. Some countries, Finland and also Sweden, are above the level, but most European countries are far below it. And in the Lisbon Declaration, it said, Europe needs excellence in its universities to optimise the processes which underpin the knowledge society and meet the target of becoming the most competitive and dynamic knowledge-based economy in the world. Well, looking back 7 years, we've not achieved that. Indeed, we're rather well behind it. And it's worth saying that one of the other things that the Lisbon Declaration said was, given that they are situated at the crossroads of research, education and innovation, universities in many respects hold the key to the knowledge economy and society. And it pointed out that 80% of fundamental research is actually done in universities, and that universities employ something like 35% of active researchers. So that's the kind of intellectual background of what the European Commission is playing for. And the European Commission has issued, over the period, a number of actually very important publications. And I list them here. I'm not going to go through them all, though I am going to refer particularly to one, Mobilising the Brain Power of Europe. But I think what this listing of publications from the Commission emphasises is the extent to which the Commission is anxious to promote reform, not just, if I may say so, in Romania, but in France, in Germany, in Italy, and elsewhere across Europe. It's very, very important. If you believe, as the Commission certainly does, that research in higher education, research in universities, is key to the economic future of the European Union, then the reform movement in European higher education is extraordinarily important, and probably more important than many of the other things that the European Commission is trying to do. Now, underlying these publications are three trends, and these trends, as it were, spread across Europe. One is that all higher education systems have expanded very rapidly, and the funding for them is not keeping pace with the expansion of student numbers. So that's common across Europe. So if we're going to change, we have to change, relying less on state support. A second trend is that the European Commission wants to encourage universities to obtain a growing percentage of their resources from areas outside the state. And a third is that universities should have more connection to society through third mission, that is, connections with industry, with local and regional government. And this will require extensive organisational and cultural changes within institutions. So the programme that Professor Bracciano talked about is very central to what the European Commission is wanting to see, not just here, but elsewhere in Europe. Now, I want to talk just a little bit about one, and probably the most important, of these European Commission publications. Because I think in many ways the modernisation agenda hangs on understanding what this particular publication is saying. Let's start with first, investing more and better in the modernisation and quality of universities is a direct investment in the future of Europe and Europeans. This, as it were, sets out, if you like, the absolute target for the Commission. But what this publication identified, and here we're not talking about Romania, we're talking about across Europe, is the bottlenecks that exist in the European university system. The first bottleneck is uniformity. The tendency across Europe is that all universities look alike and think they're alike. There is an inadequate amount of diversity. So one of the things that the Commission is anxious to emphasise is that universities should develop their own mission, and for some universities their mission might be research intensive, in others it might be towards regional engagement, and so forth. We at the Institute, Paul Temple and I, got a very large grant from the European Commission to look at 7 European countries and to see the extent to which entrepreneurialism had developed in their university systems. And it was very interesting that although in all these countries there was a sense of system-wide uniformity, you could in fact categorise the universities quite closely between, as it were, metropolitan classic universities, regional universities, specialist institutions, and whether these institutions were research intensive or teaching intensive. The important point about uniformity is that you cannot, in the expanded higher education system, have all universities equally committed to research, because the funding is simply not going to be available. We are obsessed in a way, in spite of our failure to meet the Lisbon target on research and development, least as important for some universities as to concentrate on fundamental research. A second bottleneck has already been mentioned this morning, which is insularity. The fact that universities look inward rather than look outward to the wider society. That's characteristic of universities, maybe not just here in Romania, but certainly across the rest of Europe. Over-regulation. In the project that I just mentioned, what we found, for example, in a country like Spain, was that all academics were civil servants and that their promotion, for example, was entirely based on civil service criteria. So there was no incentive to go out and work with industry because promotion wouldn't take account of that. In other words, there were very few incentives to do the kinds of things that the European Commission is trying to persuade universities to do. But of course, over-regulation is also about having too many rules that prevent academics from building substantial enterprises, act as a blockage to entrepreneurialism, and so forth. And finally, the bottleneck is underfunding, and that, as I've said, is something which affects all higher education systems in Europe. In the list of items that appear in the core modernisation agenda, governance is very important. And this takes us to the quotation here. Autonomy is a precondition for universities to be able to respond to society's changing needs. So we're moving from a situation where state governments, in fact, control universities, to a situation where universities are themselves the driving force of change. And this is a very substantial change for many European countries. And of course, with that change and with autonomy comes the question of financial accountability. Now, I want to spend a bit of time on finance because this is an important element in what I want to talk about. There is a very close linkage between funding systems and governance. In other words, if you move to a situation of budgetary autonomy, then the requirements of institutional governance change. If all your funding comes direct from the ministry, if the ministry, in fact, line manages the university through its financial applications, then the requirement for institutional governance is quite low. But if you're going to move to a situation of budgetary autonomy, then all of a sudden issues of governance become very important indeed. Now, I'm quoting here from a paper by Esteban and Napoca, an American and a Finn, called University Autonomy in Europe. And this was a paper written for the European University Association. And they attempted to define financial autonomy. And I just want to go through these items for a moment before I talk further about governance itself. They start off with the extent to which universities can retain reserves. Now, of course, this is important because if you're able to retain reserves, you could build up reserves in order to invest in particular projects that the university wants to undertake. You could decide that you want to allocate money differentially to a particular department or faculty because that's of particular importance to the university. Or you could decide to put the money into particular research research projects or into particular buildings and so forth which you need to carry your autonomy through. An ability to set tuition fees. Well, one might have some qualifications about that. Certainly in the United Kingdom, and I'll come on to the United Kingdom in a moment, while universities can set tuition fees for international students, the government controls fees quite carefully for home students, for UK students, because we've embarked on a very elaborate and costly loan system which requires the government to support the loans. So the Treasury is very anxious that there is some control there. Ability to borrow. Certainly in the United Kingdom, universities have the ability to borrow, and they can borrow money mostly for capital programs. But they borrow, of course, from banks, from building societies, etc., to build student residences. And they borrow against their own financial capacity. So they operate very much in a private sector way. Now, of course, there have been some disasters, but on the whole, the university sector has benefited enormously from this ability to obtain money from other sources outside the state. Ability to invest in financial products. Well, what that means is that if you have substantial monies of your own, you can invest in equities, or you can invest in normal financial investment manner. The University of Cambridge, which of course is exceptional, has something like £1 billion invested in long-term property and equities and shares. Now that wouldn't be the case for most universities in the UK, but it does emphasise the point that the freedom to use your money in the way that you think is useful to the university is a very, very important freedom. Ability to issue shares and bonds. Well, I think this is more appropriate in the United States than in Britain, but some British universities have, in fact, invested in bonds in order to improve their buildings. And finally, of course, ownership of lands and properties. If you own your buildings, that strengthens your balance sheet. It also means that you are responsible for maintaining the buildings, and you have to take decisions whether you spend your money on more academic staff or actually maintaining the buildings that you already have. And there's been a great debate about that in the United Kingdom, and the debate is ongoing with the current reductions in government monies. Now, as you can see, from all this definition of financial autonomy, the governance implications are very important. Accountability, transparency, and of course the external voice. And the external voice is very important for government, for the state, and probably very important for the universities. And I'll come on to that. But the external voice in the governance of the university, governing bodies which actually have people from outside the university on them, becomes a very important issue as you move the universities from being entirely state-funded to being substantially privately funded. Now, I want to talk now about the UK university system. within Europe. And I think that's partly because of the UK's position in the world rankings. As you'll know, there's a Chinese university, the Shanghai Jiao University, now produces world rankings of universities. The UK alone in Europe has got 4 universities in the top 15 in the Shanghai Jiao rankings. There are no other European universities in the top 15. And I've forgotten how many European universities appear in the top 50, but it's remarkably small. And the top 50 is dominated by American universities, which again, if I take you back to why the European Commission is so anxious, the European Commission wants to see Europe, as it were, in a much better position in the rankings as compared to the United States universities. And these rankings are very important. There's an Irish academic called Hazel Corn, who's done a big survey for OECD of inquiring of heads of universities of the extent to which these world rankings affect institutional strategy. 93% of university heads want to improve their ranking and make that a key part of their strategy. Amazingly, 70% want their universities to be in the top 10%, and 71% of heads of universities want their universities to be in the top 25% of the Shanghai Jiao ranking. There's not going to be much room in the top 25% or top 10%. But I think what it shows is the extent to which this question of improvement and competition is now endemic, as it were, within European higher education and indeed world higher education. And the second reason why I think the UK system is quite important is because of these two words, autonomy and governance. Now, historically, in the UK, universities, in a sense, came before the state. In other words, universities were founded in Manchester and in Birmingham, and of course in Oxford and Cambridge, without the thought that they were going to attract any state money. And they only later became part of the state. So we have a very strong sense of autonomy within the British university system. And the second thing is on governance. If you went to Manchester, Birmingham, or Sheffield, or Leeds universities, they have always had lay, that is, non-academic governing bodies. It was the cities that created the universities, and the cities always wanted to play a part in the running of the universities. So we have a very strong belief in the UK that governing bodies made up substantially of external people. You could call them stakeholders, I suppose, though they're not really stakeholders, are an important element in university governance. And of course, if you went to the United States, what you find, not only at the private universities like Harvard, Princeton, and Yale, but in all the state universities, again, you would find very dedicated governing bodies made up entirely of lay, that is, external people. Often alumni of the university, but by no means exclusively. Indeed, if you went to the University of Wisconsin, what you find is that some of the members of the governing body are appointed by the government of the state, is so important that you have a special number plate. So you can see a region of the university, travelling around the state. It's sort of ridiculous in a way. It wouldn't go down well in the United Kingdom. But it emphasises the sense in which there is a public involvement in the university and a pride in the university, which is a pride that is exemplified, as it were, through election or through appointment. That people want to be members of governing bodies of universities because they think it's an important public service. Now, I want to talk for a few moments about a financial model of one UK university. Now, I hope people can see that at the back. What it shows is how the pattern of income of one university has changed between 1982 to 1985 to 2006, 2009. Now, if I could point with this thing, how do I do it? Well, I will have to try and show you because I can't make that work. But if I point to 1982-85, what you'll see is that 61.9% of the income of that university came from the state. You're completely distorted. Nothing like having a helpful colleague. We need to get back to the I just want to put the whole screen, I think. That's the point. Go right. Let me just talk about the pointer. What this shows is that in 1982 to 1985, this university had over 60% of its funding came from the state. If you've gone back a previous decade, it would be something like 80 to 90% money coming from the state. But if you look at 2006, 2009, only 24% of its money is coming from the state. 28.8%, nearly 30%, is coming from fees. Fees paid by students, paid by home students, and by international students. Now that, of course, you have a module of your program on higher education marketing. You can see why marketing is going to be important. Because if you don't get your fee income in, then you'll have to lose some of your academic posts. 18% of the income comes from externally generated research funds. Now, if you took the state money, half of which in this university is given for research, something like 40% of the budget of this university comes out of research, either competitively achieved research or And finally, something like, again, nearly 30% of the income is other income, which comes from other sources. Regional activities, halls of residence, creating shops, consultancy, and so forth. So you have a picture here of a university that's moved from being substantially a state enterprise to very much a mixed enterprise. In other words, it's a mixed economy university. And if you then think about what the implications are for running this kind of university, of course, it requires new forms of management, but of course, it also requires new forms of governance. The kind of governance structure that you have, where 80% of your money comes from the state, is entirely different when only 25% of your money comes from the state, and when the rest of the money comes competitively in various ways from other sources. And that's really the theme of what I want to talk about. There are, you see, very important governance implications of the UK financial model. The first is that we have a contract with the government to supply certain things, the education of X numbers of students. And that financial memorandum lays on the governing body certain responsibilities, including the solvency of the university. So again, the governing body becomes a very important component. It also expects that the governing body will have responsibility, final responsibility, for adopting a university strategy. That's not to say that the strategy doesn't come out of the academic side of the university, but the governing body has to decide to what extent it's realistic. And remember, these are people from outside the university. The governing body has to have a strong audit committee to ensure that the money is being properly spent and spent against the university's objectives. The head of the university, Vice-Chancellor in the UK, and the Rector here in Romania, is the accounting officer. And if the university gets into financial trouble, the director can be dismissed, and he may well, or she may well be asked to appear before the Public Accounts Committee of the House of Commons and explain what's gone wrong. So the financial memorandum is an important element, even though in the university model that I showed, only 24% of the money actually comes from the state. The second thing is this whole question of a lay, in other words, a largely external governing body. And one of the interesting questions is, how do you appoint a governing body? And here, what will be the normal arrangement is that there will be a nominations committee of the university, which would establish the skill set, which the university would want to see on the governing body: doctors, lawyers, property developers, etc., etc. And then go out and try and find these people, and then there will be an election by the governing body of names put to the governing body. So this is a pretty complicated process, but of course in the UK it's been going on for a very long time. It's been going on for more than a century, so it's not new for us. For universal countries introducing governing bodies, of course this becomes, a very important innovation. Now, a third element of all this is an appointed successful universities tend to find that some of their best staff are taken away to head other universities. So an appointed head of the university is an important element in all this, and then the question is such a person a chief executive, or are they an academic leader? And that's something, again, which the governing body, if the governing body is the selecting organisation, will have to decide what does the university need. The governance implications are, of course, for a strong Senate, a strong academic body. There's no sense in just having a governing body which is made up of a lay membership if you don't have a strong Senate which can have a continuous dialogue with the governing body. One needs a professional administration. In other words, you need a strong director of finance, you need a strong director of estates, and you need a strong university secretary who is responsible, as it were, for organising the governance of the university. And these are people who in the UK system have come up, there's a university administrative profession, and so people move up and finally achieve a top position. And again, it will be done on the basis of nationwide selection. And finally, you need an academic management team of what we call pro-vice-chancellors, you would probably call pro-rectors, people drawn from academic ranks who would look after the academic management of the university and take an interest in the student experience and take an interest in finance and so forth. So those are, I think, the governance implications of the UK financial model. Now, what conclusions can we draw from this? Well, I think the first conclusion is that if you move down this route towards university autonomy, and autonomy not just being academic autonomy, but being financial autonomy, you move to a concept of institutional self-reliance. And institutional self-reliance means that the institution has got to be managed. And by that I don't mean that it's got to be managed by a group of non-academic managers. It has to be managed by academics and by non-academics. You need to have a partnership between what you might call the professional managers and the senior academic managers. So autonomy involves much greater interest in the management of the university than one would need to have if one is entirely funded by the state. You need to have financial literacy which runs through the institution. A second conclusion is that it's absolutely key to have an external governance component. If you believe that governments will hand over money without strings to an entirely academic body, you, on the whole, throughout Europe, you're living in a very idealistic world. There is a sense in which governments need to think that they have a secure governing body to which they're handing over the money. And again, you can find that the governing body will be extremely helpful to the university in assisting it in managing its affairs. There's no question that bringing lay people into the governance of the university can be very important for the university in all sorts of ways. Lay governors can be the critical friend of the university. They can sometimes say things to the university which the university won't say to itself. They can bring expertise, particularly financial expertise, and development of a campus expertise into the university which the university itself might not have. It can be a public voice for the university in talking to government. It's very easy for government to say to somebody with an entirely academic background that the universities don't really need any more money. But if you've got a very serious and experienced businessman, it's much more difficult who says universities need more money. The governing bodies can be an enormously effective lobby for the universities outside. Governing bodies can also be very helpful in defining a university mission. What is the university good at? How should that be reinforced? What is the university not so good at? And why we should move away from that area. The importance of selecting university leaders. I realise that I'm treading on difficult ground here. But let me say what we find as the advantage of selecting our university leaders. First of all, university leaders become change agents. They come from another university, they bring other practices, they force the university to think about itself. Secondly, you're ensuring as far as you can that you've got the best person for the job. Our selection committees would be made up usually half of the lay external members and half of the academic members nominated by the Senate. We would tend to use headhunters. And there are lots of professional headhunters out there who are very keen to earn money by producing lists of candidates who one might wish to consider. We publicly advertise the posts so that anybody can apply. So the process of appointing a university vice-chancellor is complicated, but it demands of the institution that the institution thinks about what does it want. What sort of vice-chancellor does it want to have in these particular circumstances? What are the things the university is not good at that it might want to be looking for those skills to be in the new head of the institution? And finally, you need to have audit, both financial audit and academic audit, and you need to recognise that you have good accountability. Very interestingly, in the project that I referred to earlier, we found that in Spain, universities didn't have accounts. You couldn't tell whether the Technical University of Valencia was in surplus or in deficit because the accounts were all held in the ministry. But of course, the university had therefore had no real ability to manage itself. It couldn't really be called self-reliant because the essential tools of managing its budget were denied to it. So accountability is really very important, and your governing body will look at the accounts, and so will the government look at the accounts. Now, when I was thinking about what I was going to say, I reached my conclusions about the sort of course of reform in Europe. I was not aware of a paper provides an international corroboration of what I've been saying in my last slide. Now, it's worth saying a little bit about who the authors are, because it tells you a little bit about why this has been an influential paper within Europe. Aghion is a professor at Harvard. The second name is, I think, is the Free University of Brussels. Hoxby is at Stanford. Mas-Colell is from Barcelona and is now, interestingly, General Secretary of the European Research Council. Sapir is again from the Free University of Brussels. So this is a mixed paper by senior university professors, both from the United States and also from European universities. And I'm afraid it's terribly influential in Europe because the first author comes from Harvard. And it's published in these Bruegel blueprints, which again puts it in a particular category as far as European civil servants are concerned. And what this paper says about governance is entirely what I've already said, which is the reason why I've put it up. What they're saying is they want to see universities having autonomy, but if they have autonomy, they need to have an external board. There needs to be an efficient and professional management structure. There needs to be an appointed, not an elected rector, but there needs to be strong internal participatory mechanisms. In other words, the academic community has got to be very closely involved in the governance of the institution. This is not a plan to remove academics from the management of the university. Quite the contrary, it's to draw out the management capability of the academic community in a wider agenda for self-reliance. So that is the modernisation agenda which the European Commission is trying to encourage European universities to follow. It moves faster in some countries than others. It's moving quite slowly in France, although Professor Sarkozy has introduced new legislation which has changed the state of play for about 20 French universities. It's moving very slowly in Italy. It's moving, I think, quite quickly now in Germany. It's moved a very long way in the Netherlands. It is, of course, very much what we're used to in the United Kingdom. I would go back to the fact that although governance is not what puts a university in high up in the league tables, it's the products of what the academic community produces, which puts you high up in the league tables. Nevertheless, good governance provides a framework within which good academic performance can take place. So I would commend to you the European reform movement, and I think that your programme is ideally constructed to ensure that you meet them. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Professor Kepler, for the very interesting contributions to our program. I have some short remarks before the coffee break. Understanding humanity. our state allocates around $1,000 per student. In the European Union, about $10,000 per student. In the United States, $30,000 per student. So it's different. In these conditions of underfunding, we have to have different specific targets for each system of higher education, I think. Concerning autonomy, we face now previously unaccounted attack on autonomy, and not because of the education and the program, because of the other funding laws. Because of the intervention of the state in the internal affairs of the university, invoking different circumstances we have here in the community. Concerning rankings, we should recognize that these rankings are putting pressure on the course of higher education. We should look around the world and we see a real earthquake in higher education. But it's a big scandal in France because they have no universities among the first 50, or they have one university only. It's a big scandal in Romania because we don't have one in the first 500. So again, it's a relative thing. And governance is a real problem. Maybe after the program, the accomplishment of the program, you could suggest a solution for a real governance in the university system in Germany. So thank you again, Mr. Shepard. I invite you to